Hey everyone, welcome back. So let's understand property decorators of Python. But before we get into that, we'll first understand that why do we even need getters and setters, what are they, and what is the use of them, and what could go wrong if we don't use getters and setters. And then moving forward, we'll see how we can write getter and setter methods using the traditional way. And then finally, we'll see how we can rewrite them using the property decorator and property.setter. So let's first take an example without using getter and setter methods. I'll create a class and call it BankAccount. We'll define a constructor so that we can construct the bank account object. Here we'll pass self and balance. Let's do the assignment. So self.balance equals to the balance that we'll receive. Now let's go ahead and create an object for bank account class. So bank account, and let's pass a balance of 100. Now in this program, I haven't used a getter and setter method. Now the problem is that this line is actually doing a direct assignment, as in there is no protection. And what it actually means is that I can update the balance anywhere in this program outside this class with any value I want. So for example, I will access the balance variable. And let's say I update it to something like minus 5,000. And now if I go ahead and print the account balance, let's save and run this, I see the balance as minus 5,000. So what just happened here? In this example, first we are directly exposing the balance attribute over here. So that simply means that in any part of this program, anyone can change it to anything. It could be a negative number, a string, or even something meaningless, right? So let's say if I update it to 0, then also it gets updated. Even if I update it to a string, right? Let's say I write something as cheat mode on. If I save this and if I run this, it got updated, right? So there are a lot of real-time risk with this piece of code. For example, we can update the balance with an invalid data like minus 5,000 or any value. And also there is no validation because I was able to update the balance to a string value. And also in this way, there is no way for me to make the balance read-only. And along with that, when it is getting updated to what value, it's very hard to debug. So in any real-time systems like, it could be banking, health records, or even game stats, right? This is very dangerous. And this is exactly where getter and setter come into pictures. So let's go ahead and implement getter and setter method for this program, but we'll first do it in the traditional way. So the first thing that we are going to do is we will make this variable as private. So we are going to protect it, and in order to make it private, you can put a leading underscore. So here the leading underscore means that it is private. Now it is protected, so I'll just remove it for now. And now as this is protected, we'll go ahead and create a getter method. So let's define the getter method. I'll name it as getBalance and we'll pass self. Here we will return self._balance. So this getter method is just to read the balance. So as this getter method is only for reading the balance, we'll go ahead and write a setter method as well, wherein we can add validation to the new balance that is getting updated. And so in any case, if there is a need to update the balance, at least we'll have more control while the balance is getting updated. And we can achieve that by writing a setter method. Let's define it. So I'll call it set balance, and here we'll pass self and the value. And here we'll put a validation if value, as in the new balance that is being entered, if that is less than 0, we'll raise an error. We can raise a value error here and we'll give a message saying balance cannot be negative. And then if there is a need to update, we can update the balance with the new value. Now here we have constructed the object and we have passed a balance of 100. And now in order to read the data for the balance, what we can do is, let's first write print and then acc dot, we will call the getter method to read the balance. So get balance, and as this is a method and as it is a traditional way of doing it, we will use parenthesis because we are calling a method. Let's save and run this. So here we can see the balance by calling this method. And let's say if we want to update the balance, we can call the setter method. So set balance, and here we'll pass the new value. And now if I print the balance, I will be seeing the updated value. So if I save this, we have the updated value here. But let's say if I try to set the balance to something which is not valid. So let's say if I try to pass something as minus 5,000. And if I save this and run this, we get the value error as balance cannot be negative. But also there's one more thing that you have to keep in mind. Just because you are making a variable as private, that does not mean that you cannot update it. This is not a hardcore rule. This is just a convention. So this is just like telling other developers that this particular attribute is internal and you shouldn't touch it directly from outside the class. So even as a developer, even if you know that, okay, this is a private variable and this attribute is totally internal, and even though you shouldn't update it, let's say if you go ahead and update it, Python will allow you to update. So let's say acc.balance, if I update it to, let's say, ABC, and if I save this, and let me remove this for now. here you can see that the balance got updated to ABC, right? And that is exactly why we have setter method. So you need to include all the validation logic over here in your setter method. Okay, so this is just a convention, but I hope you got the idea that why do we need a getter and a setter method. So let's move on and see that in the modern Python, how do we achieve getter and setter. So when you use property decorator, you can actually access your getter and setter method without using parentheses. So here if you see, I have called the getter method and the setter method, the line that I had before, right, by using parentheses. But the moment you start using the property getter or setter method, you can access the methods just like variables without using parentheses. So let's go ahead and modify this example. So I'll just remove it for now. So this is going to remain the same. The only thing that's changing is the way we are writing the getter and setter methods. And here also we can give the same name, right? So here I'll keep it balance. Here also I will keep it balance. And because now we are using the property decorator, so we have to give the property decorator here. So now this is your getter method. This is how you write a getter method using the property decorator. So you have to make use of the property decorator. And now you also have to write the setter method for this getter method, right? So the setter method is balance. So here you will do something like this, @ then the getter method name dot setter. So this is going to make this method as the setter method for this getter method. And now let's see how we can construct an object and then access these methods. So let's first create an object, bank account, and we'll pass again 100. Now to read this balance, if I want to call the getter method, I can do something like this. I'll first print it, so ACC dot, and then I can call the getter method just like a variable. So see, I'm not using any parentheses here, and this will work perfectly fine. So if I save this now, I can see the balance. So this is coming from this line. And similarly, if you want to call the setter method, right? Let's say if you want to update this value, so you can call the setter method and you'll do it with ACC dot, and setter method also we have to access just like a variable. So I'll give the name of the setter method just like a variable without parentheses, and I will update the value to, let's say, 200. And after this, if I print the account balance, we get the updated value as 200. And of course these validations are going to work, right? So let's say if you are trying to update the balance to something negative, right? Let's say -200, and if you try to run this, you will get this value error. So we got this value error as balance cannot be negative. So if I summarize, while using property decorator, you are actually calling your getter method just like a variable, and even your setter method just like a variable. And also in your setter method, you can still add any validation or logic whenever you need it. So all in all, you should use property decorator whenever you need to protect or validate an attribute, or if you want to hide internal structure. And of course, if you want the code to stay clean and intuitive. And remember that you should use direct access, as in without underscore, whenever you feel that it is safe to use it in the direct access way. Otherwise, use getters and setters when the value matters, right? So like in case of balance, age, password, or health, you should always use getters or setter methods. And of course, in Python, always prefer property decorator because it gives you the best of both worlds, right? As in control and simplicity. So that's it for now, and I'll see you in the next one.